overstimulation because there's just too much sensory information going on. There's just too much going on in your environment. When there is a lot of external sensory stimuli, your brains have difficulty processing it all. For most people, they have a filter, so they don't notice all the different sights, sounds, smells, the taste, the touch of everything. You don't notice much of that because it's not important enough to notice. That is a mental filter that a lot of people have. Neurodiverse people often don't have that filter, or it's not always properly functioning. Having ADHD myself, been there, done that multiple times. What happens is that there's so much coming in and your brains can't filter it, so they're trying to make sense of everything. And that is okay as long as there is not that much coming in. So you're watching a video and there's but the sound is contextual, so the sound adds to the video and helps to process that, process the information. That's fine, you can handle that. Taste can be overwhelming, but if it's nice food, if it's a nice taste, you can deal with that. But when you are in, for example, and this happens, a lot of people experience this in large groups. When you're in a room where there's a lot of people and everyone is talking, so you hear a lot of sound, but it's not giving any context or any additional information to what you're seeing. You're just seeing a jumble of people who may or may not want your attention, who are all giving their own facial expressions, who are all emanating their own energies, because a lot of people who are sensitive to sensory information are also sensitive to people's presence and the energy, the vibe that they give off. You smell them, you hear them, but it's all garbled together and there is no real context. There is no information to be distilled from this, but your brains are still trying to distill information. And they get so hyped up and so wired trying to make sense of this garble that they go on the fritz. What you experience the moment that happens, because that is the moment of overstimulation, what you experience then is anxiety. Because there's a lot going on and your brains are wired to take in sensory information of your environment, of your body, to calculate whether you are safe or not. But if there's this much information going on, you cannot calculate whether or not you are safe, and therefore by default you assume that you're not. So you become anxious. Your fight or flight response is triggered. You become tense, deciding, whether you should run out of the room or hit the next person you see in the face, or hurt yourself, or in any way. Panic. Actual anxiety. And this is actual anxiety. The cause is not a visible threat. The cause is overwhelm. Pure sensory overwhelm. Because the moment you leave that space and you allow yourself time to process the fact that, okay, I'm in a more quiet, more secluded space now. Here I can determine that yes, I am safe. Then the anxiety dies down again. Then you can unwind and process and it's okay. And depending on how overstimulated you are and how long that lasted, that situation in which you were overstimulated, it may take a couple of minutes or hours or even days to wind down from that. But there is one step that you can go further, and I'm absolutely convinced that a lot of clinical anxiety disorders and panic disorders can be traced back to this. You feel that anxiety, but you don't know where it comes from. So you have this onslaught of everything. You have a feeling you need to do something, but you don't know what, because with so much sensory input, it's completely unclear to your primal brain, your reptilian brain. Do I fight? Do I flee? What can I fight? Where do I flee to? That's completely up in the air. So you don't actually do anything, but you feel that anxiety. Now, if that situation is prolonged, the anxiety will get worse and worse and worse because you're not doing anything to get out of there because, well, you don't know what you can do. And rationally, you know that there is no danger. So you're getting all these alarm signals saying that you're in danger, but rationally there is nothing. That clash adds to the turmoil that's already there. And what happens next, or what can happen, is that the sensory onslaught is so strong and the anxiety that piles up and piles up gets worse and worse to the point where you panic. And panic is where your primal brain says, I'm done waiting this out, I'm doing something. But at that point, your primal brain takes over. So you can't actually rationally calculate anymore what is going on and what you can do. It's mindless panic, and the onslaught is still coming. And the best I can describe is from a personal experience I've had. It was nighttime, and I was sitting in a bus on my way to the train station. I was going to see a friend in another city, and I would be taking the train there. It was January, it was cold. That is a sensory experience I don't like. I don't like being cold. It was pouring with rain, and it was dark. I was already quite anxious because I don't like having to go by public transport, but it was really the best option in this case, so I decided to do it anyway. So I'm already anxious, and I'm sitting in this bus, and it's pouring with rain. It's coming down in sheets, and the lights of the street lanterns reflect in all the droplets and reflect in the pools on the ground. Never long enough to leave an image. It's all moving, it's all sparkling. And at some point I could no longer make sense of it. I had no idea what's going on. I got more and more anxious. At that point I didn't realize, it took me years to realize what had happened that night. But we get to the bus station which is next to the train station. I get out. I know where I should be, but I don't really know where my body is. I'm moving, but I don't know where the floor is. And I get into the train station. There's bright, glaring lights, and a lot of people bustling about. And there's the ticket machines, and there's the shops, and there's the commercials, and there's this and that. And there's just so much input that I can't focus on anything anymore. I can't see anything anymore, and all the images just start blurring together because I physically cannot focus. My eyes do not focus on what I see. So I know where I should be, but I can't see it. I can't feel it. I don't know where everything. I wasn't even certain what was real and what was not. What were things that were actually there, and what were things that my completely hyper and overheated brain were making up. Because when you're anxious, you see something you don't instantly recognize for what it is. Your brain starts associating what could it be. And that is how a crumpled crisp bag somewhere in a corner can look like a dead rat. I've had associations like that before, and it's not real. There is not really a rat there, but I just couldn't, I had no idea what was going on anymore. And it felt in a way that I later, when I became a psychologist, recognized as a psychosis. However, I was not psychotic. I'd never had psychotic episodes before, and I knew that what I was seeing was not all of it was real. And people with a real psychosis cannot tell the delusions from reality, because they truly believe that what they see is reality. They do not believe that there are two things to it. But I was very well aware of the fact that what I was seeing might or might not be real. And what I was hearing was just garbled. I couldn't focus on it, but that didn't make it real or unreal. I couldn't focus on it. So what I did is I called my friend, because I was able to do that. I called my friend and said, look, I'm not coming over. This is not working. I don't know what's happening. I called my husband. He said, okay, just take a cab, not back in the bus. Get a cab, have it deliver you back home, and we'll figure it out. By the time I was in the cab, which was a secluded area with just a cab driver, I was already calming down. By the time I got home, the entire overwhelm was gone. Also in part because the anticipation of having to take the train was no longer there, because I wasn't going. Years later, I realized that what I experienced there is an overstimulation psychosis. It's not an actual psychosis, but it's a point where your brains become so panicked, so frantic, that you don't recognize what is actually going on, where your body ends and where the world begins. You may lose your sense of self, you may lose your sense of reality, you may lose your sense of your environment and your relation to that environment. And that is a terrifying experience, because you know what you see is not right. You know what you experience, what you feel is not right. But you don't know what is. And the panic that causes is actual panic. So the cause is overstimulation, simply too much sensory stimulation. But it causes actual anxiety and causes actual panic. However, most people are not aware that mere sensory input can have that profound an effect. So they are diagnosed with a general anxiety disorder. I was too. A lot of my clients were. They're diagnosed with a panic disorder because you feel anxious, but you don't know why. That's more or less the definition of a generalized anxiety disorder. You feel panicked, you don't know why, so you don't know what the trigger is. So you become scared and anxious that you might panic again, which adds to the anxiety, which makes it likely that you panic because your stress level is already much higher, so you don't need that much sensory input to trigger a panic attack. And people get diagnosed with a panic disorder, a panic attack disorder. But medication and endless therapy about your thoughts, about what you think and what you feel is not going to help, because the cause is not you. The cause is not within you. For once, this is one of the times it's not between your ears. It's actually out there. It's the sensory input that is so much that your brains can't process it, because especially, and this happens especially in neurodivergent people, because they have a sensory filter that doesn't work as stringently as that of most neurotypical people. So there's much more sensory input that comes in. There's much more that needs processing. And most neurotypical therapists don't even know that this exists. I've had clients in my practice who, once they discovered that, yes, their panic attacks were actually caused by overwhelm, got a handle in it so quickly that I saw them maybe once or twice after that and no more, because they no longer needed help. Rather than years and years of therapy, they realized, oh, hold on, this is what's going on. Oh, but then I know what to do. That's something I can handle. So if you experience a sensory overwhelm, if you know of yourself that you are easily overwhelmed, know that the anxiety that comes from that is a natural response. Know that when you panic, when that anxiety gets too much, that is a natural response, but that there's nothing wrong with you. It just is a signal that you need to manage your stimuli more carefully. So have a talk with your therapist or your doctor or with friends how you can make things more manageable for yourself. Guard yourself in that respect, and things will become a lot more manageable and you will feel healthier and stronger for it. That's it for today, and I hope to see you again in the next video.